Get ready for Dr. Rosie Ward, the award-winning author and podcast host who has an incredible gift of energizing and activating people from the stage or in person. Dr. Rosie Ward is an expert in rehumanizing workplaces and a Dare to Lead facilitator. Visit drrosieward.com for more information. Let's welcome Dr. Rosie Ward. Wow, Dr. Ward, and it's so amazing to have you here in studio for your very own Xizzle TV episode. Thank you so much for coming in. You flew down from Minneapolis to Miami to be here. Thank you.
It was a really, really tough ask, but I'm super happy to be here.
In the middle of dead winter, she left a frigid Minneapolis to come to a beautiful South Florida. And that's how we do here at Xizzle TV, because everything's on fire. And that's why you're here, because what you do is fuego. All right? And we'll start with that. We'll start with your superpower. What is that superpower that you do have while you're on stage and while you're also engaging with people one-on-one, uno a uno?
I think my biggest superpower is I normalize the messiness of being human for people so that they can ultimately get out of their own way. So I equip them with tools and languages and practices so they can have a greater impact in their life, whether it's at work or at home.
And what are those tools? You mentioned tools. We don't want to give everything away, but maybe one or two that you can share with the viewers here of those tools, por favor, please.
I'm happy to. Well, the first tool I'm going to say is language. And here's why I say that, is that if we don't have accurate language, like if you and I aren't speaking the same language, it's really hard to process things and know how to move through them. And so I always like to start out with core and common language to help us understand, why is life so hard right now? Why are people feeling so difficult right now? Why am I frustrated with people? And so the language that I give them, I can't take credit for. It's been around for a long time, but it's an acronym called VUCA, V-U-C-A, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what VUCA gives us language to describe is the fact that we live and work and lead in a world where disruption is the norm. And here's why this is important, is that our human biology, our human DNA, is the opposite of what a VUCA world is asking of us. We are hardwired to seek out familiarity and comfort. We are hardwired to maximize reward and minimize threat. And so the more our VUCA world gets, the more our instincts kick in to self-protect, cling tightly to what's familiar, and we get stuck. And so the tools that we give people is just start to pay attention to, when are you noticing yourself getting judgy? When are you noticing yourself getting really attached to being right? When are you noticing yourself getting triggered to be irritable? And just be that version of yourself that we all have that isn't great, that isn't showing up as the spouse, parent, friend, leader, colleague that we want to have, and start to catch ourselves sooner so that we can disrupt that, because we all do it. And so we do. I mean, it's welcome to being human. If you think you're not, you're a robot. And so just starting to pay attention to, oh, I'm feeling really agitated, or I'm feeling really fill in the blank, judgmental. And then can I pause, and what are things that can reset me? I'm a music person, so music can reset me. Maybe it's taking a deep breath, maybe it's going for a walk, but we have to build the muscle to pause and disrupt this autopilot that we all go on that fundamentally gets in our way and keeps us from having the impact we want to have. And so many people want to pretend they're not human, or they're immune to it, or that doesn't happen to me, that's my colleague is the problem. And it's like, yeah, no, we all do it.
Speaking of music, what's the Michael Jackson song, Man in the Mirror?
Yeah. I use that in one of my trainings. So there we go. We have to, right? We have to start looking at ourselves. And I think this day and age, there's so much blame and there's so much righteousness, and it's everybody else's problem. But we all have to start looking in the mirror. And so we give people tools to help them do that, because it's cringy and it's uncomfortable.
And what's the acronym again? That's in journalism. We have to tell people what we're going to tell them. Tell them we told them, and then tell them again.
It's VUCA. V-U-C-A. VUCA. Yeah.
It sounds like Hispanics or some Latino everything.
It might be. I don't know. Could be.
Sounds like yuca, which is what we love to eat. Yuca, VUCA, that's how I'm going to remember. And what does VUCA stand for again?
Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
And this is, your calling card. That's that is your thing, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And with VUCA and all the tools that you're telling me you're basically the best friend of any C-level executive. So why is rehumanizing so important for any corporation, and really not just corporation, any company of any size?
The reason it's so important is because human beings are messy. We do get stuck in the self-protective mode, and then you wonder why on teams there's disconnection and defensiveness and people not leaning into change and engagement problems and all of those things. And so many organizations don't care for the human aspect. They look at strategy, they look at all of these things, and they forget to care for the fact that as human beings, we are just messy. And so what does it mean to care for that? Well, what we have to do fundamentally is we have to recognize that there is this gap between what the VUCA world is demanding of us and our human DNA and instincts. And it's not that people are being butt heads on purpose or people are difficult, it's people are human. And so how can we actually equip people to basically close that gap so teams can be more effective, leaders can be more effective, and organizations can get the results they want to have? And so when leaders and organizations get that and recognize that it's not a quick fix and our world isn't going to get any less VUCA, so we only have one choice: to upskill our people to show up differently and lead differently and work with their humanity rather than against their humanity.
Listen, and I'm going to break from the conversation, whatever, right now, because you keep saying VUCA, and I love it. From now on, when you're on stage, you got to get the crowd to interact with you, and you go, when I say VU, you say ka. So let's do it right now. When I say VU, you say ka. VU.
Ka.
VU.
Ka.
There we go, and you get the whole crowd going.
I love it. I love it. It's awesome.
Let's engage them. Let's make it fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. You're making rehumanizing a human effort, a human fun activity, because you are bubbly, fun, energetic, and you bring that energy, and I feel that that's what you do on stage as well. So double down on that energy, and I love it. I think people need to hear the message, and if they're really not listening, let's wake them up. Let's wake them up with the VUCA chant, and we just came up with it right here, right now.
We got a VUCA chant. I think it's awesome. Well, and here's the thing: it can be really like solemn and cringy when you're starting to look at this stuff, and so you have to bring some levity to it. Yes. You have to bring some humor. You have to bring some fun to it, because otherwise we're just gonna resist it and hide out, and that doesn't help us either.
No. And speaking of help, your principles really help. What are some of your key principles in rehumanizing of teams and companies, and what are they exactly?
Yeah, so we developed 5 rehumanizing principles that they started out for the workplace, but what we learned quickly during COVID is these are applicable to teams, to families, to communities. They have a broad application. So the first rehumanizing principle is build a lighthouse. And so if you think about what does a lighthouse do? It cuts through the fog, it tells ships where to go. When there's dark and stormy waters, it provides a sense of oh, okay, I can see what's ahead. And so for organizations, that's having clarity of purpose. Do you actually have a purpose beyond your product, your services, making money? And do people feel connected to that purpose? So that's the beacon of light that comes out of the lighthouse. And then the base of the lighthouse are your values. And those values have to move beyond words on a website or words on a wall to actually being practiced. So have you identified really critical behaviors that tell people they're in alignment with your values or they're out of alignment with the values? And so everybody has a filter and a playbook for how to show up each and every day. And I will tell you, so many things go astray in the face of change and disruption because people don't know where to look. Well, if an organization isn't clear on its purpose, and how does this change fit in with that? How do we need to show up in the face of it? So that's the first principle, is having that clarity, having that purpose, having stuff to anchor people when the VUCA world does what it does, so that we can lean in to change, lean into progress, those types of things.
So that's one.
That's one. Rehumanizing principle number 2 is create fearless environments. So this is all about psychological safety, and not to use buzzwords, but we know that the number one characteristic of the highest performing teams is that they have high psychological safety, meaning you and I can show up together and I can be vulnerable with you. I can say I'm struggling today. I can admit I made a mistake. I can ask for help. I can say I don't know the answers. We're having very real conversations. We're not tapping out when things get cringy. We're having the difficult conversations. I'm not talking about you to someone else. I'm talking to you and staying in there. And so create fearless environments is all about how do we create those spaces where people can show up and in their full humanity, be their best self, learn and grow and stretch themselves. Because if we don't have that fearless environment, we're never going to close that gap
And
between
and not be worried that there are going to be repercussions because you don't know the answer to one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 2.
That's 2. 3 is wade in the messy middle. And I would love to tell you that there is a shortcut to change, a shortcut to closing that gap, but there isn't. No. We have to go through it. We've got to get deeply uncomfortable. We've got to do the work to rewire this programming that we've all been holding since the first 10 years of our life that has us wanting to perform, look good, and avoid looking bad, but at a great cost. So there's really a bunch of 10-year-olds running around in your organization, whether we realize it or not. And
that's a great way of putting it.
It is. It is. And so we have...
But once you realize that, it's an amazing...
Yeah.
Like, you just blew my mind. You're absolutely right.
Like, would you let your 10-year-old drive a car? Would you let your 10-year-old, create strategy for your organization? But you have a bunch of people walking around that this programming that is laid down in our brains in the first 10 years of our life is hijacking us. And that's who's showing up, getting mad about so-and-so didn't do what they were supposed to do or resisting change. It's like, okay, let's kick that 10-year-old to the back seat and put your adult badass self in the driver's seat. And we can't do that without getting messy and getting uncomfortable. Sorry, there isn't an easy button. I wish there was, but there's just not, right?
No way.
No. So that's rehumanizing principle number 3. Rehumanizing principle number 4 is show up as a leader. And this is a really critical one because I fundamentally believe leadership never has been and never will be about a title or a role, ever. We all know people who have the title, the role, the power, the authority.
Leaders.
Oh, God, no.
Far from it.
No, right? And we know people who don't have that, but they are absolutely a leader.
And everyone looks to them.
Mm-hmm. And so we look at leadership at its core is maximizing our positive impact on the world by becoming our best, fully authentic self, and then supporting those around us to break past barriers and step into their greatness. And I know that that's a mouthful, but that means I can show up as a leader with my family, with my community, with my friends, with my colleagues. Like in every interaction, am I maximizing my positive impact? Am I showing up as the best version of me? Am I helping others get to the best version of them? And that's really what we want to do. And so when we look at development, it's really, we have to shift from a formal leadership development strategy to a people development strategy. Because we need everybody in this environment, in this day and age, we need everybody equipped to be able to show up as a leader and navigate disruption.
And so, and there you have them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's actually one more.
Wait, yeah, there's 5 because we only did 4. We need the 5.
We need the 5. It is find your tribe, and that is all about the fact that as human beings, we are biologically hardwired to be in connection with other people. We are a social species, and so find your tribe is about building and broadening diverse relationships to affect change. Because here's the thing. Culture is not the CEO's responsibility. Culture is not HR's responsibility. Culture is not leadership's responsibility.
No.
Culture is everybody's responsibility.
Oh, wow. That's a good way to put it.
So every single one of us can either contribute to or contaminate the culture. And so if you think about like grassroots organizing, it starts with people who are passionate about having something be different, and it grows and it builds from there. And so that's really what this principle is about, is recognizing we all play a role in the current state of the culture of our family, our team, our workplace, and how can we diversify and strengthen our relationships so that change can happen, because it's not a solo journey.
That's an amazing way, but you keep blowing my mind with all these observations and the rehumanizing and the focus on people. And speaking of that, there's modern day life is artificial intelligence. With the rise of artificial intelligence in the workplace and everywhere we turn. I just came back from an artificial intelligence symposium before this interview. How important is having a Dr. Rosie Ward in your corporate life and company culture?
Well, I think it's critical because with the rise of AI, if we're looking at it in a way that can be productive, AI has an opportunity to actually free humans up to do the work that only humans can do. And
that work that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The 5 principles, all that, the rehumanizing.
Yeah, AI can't do that. AI can't upgrade our inner messy brain programming that gets in our way. That is deep human work that we have to do. And so I think what AI has the potential in the workplace is to start to look at where can we have definitely more automation and growth and things that used to take a whole bunch of time to actually free people up to do the work that truly only humans can do. Complex thinking and emotions, like you can't have a workplace without emotions if you have human beings. And no matter how much AI and robotics and technology exist, you still are going to have humans. And a lot of that technology is created by humans. And so we have to look at, in this day and age, how do we actually help people lean in and do the work so that they're not irrelevant and not feeling threatened by AI and whatever other technologies come down the path, and how can I show up as the best version of me and fully contribute my gifts and talents in the way that only I can, that AI can't.
That's incredible. So what you're saying is we're going to need the AI so we can mature past those 10-year-olds in the corporations and companies, and AI is going to help us do everything that you just described. Incredible. And from here on out, Dr. Rosie Ward, here on Xizzle TV, before I thank you, I always end every interview with this one key question. And I don't let people know ahead of time I'm going to ask this question, unless she's getting nervous. Don't get nervous.
Nah.
I'm just going to answer a very simple question. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't? We've talked a lot. We've covered, I think, all the bases. But anything else that maybe in the process of this conversation that we're having that just happens to be recorded, that we didn't touch upon? You said, you know what, I wish I could go back and say a little something on this. What is that?
Yeah, I think the thing that is super important when I talk about we're running around as 10-year-olds and we need to close the gap, I think explaining that more is really important, and here's why.
Hit me.
So, without getting too much into the biology, but in the first 10 or so years of our life, some research says 7 years, some years says 12, so I just use 10 as an average. But the first 10 years of our life, our brains are downloading programming from our lived experiences, watching people around us, just everything that shaped us. And this programming tells us how to behave, when to speak up, when to be quiet, when we're going to be accepted, when we're not. We kind of learn the rules of the road, if you will. But here's the thing. So that programming is actually running the show, as I mentioned, way more than we realize, because it's just been laid down and it's what's guiding our actions subconsciously.
It's the hardcore programming, the original programming.
It is. And here's the problem with it, is that studies have found that more than 70% of that programming is fundamentally flawed, negative, and self-sabotaging. And so what ends up happening is we actually develop what's called a psychological immune system. Just like we have a physical immune system that is like fighting off disease and sometimes we get sick. On the psychological level, our brains are spending an enormous amount of energy trying to keep us safe from rejection, from being judged, from people not liking us, from whatever that narrative is, fill in the blank, that has us not feel worthy. And so we all walk around wearing these masks, pretending to be something we're not, hiding our flaws and inadequacies. And we wonder why we have the struggles that we have. And so when I talk about waiting in the messy middle and really closing this gap, it's recognizing it is human to put on masks, to self-protect, to try to look good, to try to avoid looking bad. But when you put a bunch of us together and we're all doing that, you wonder why we have all the issues we have today. And so I fundamentally believe that if we can start to do the messy work to close the gap, give people language and tools and ways that they can honor their humanity but not get hijacked by it, that is what it's going to take for us to close this gap between what the VUCA world demands of us and what it means to be a human being. And if we don't do that work, it's just going to get worse. We're going to have more divisiveness, more disconnection. And I think we've got to look at it differently if we're going to heal it, honestly.
I agree. We need more unity and connection. And so we're going to end the Xizzle TV episode with the new chant, right? The VUCA chant. So do you want to start the chant? And I led the chant the first time. You lead the chant this time.
All right.
Go. Hit us up.
When I say VU, you say...
Ka. No, so you got to say, when I say VU, you say cut. Then
then
you say VU.
Because
remember, you have to.
That's right.
You have to cue the crowd as to what the instructions can be. So pretend I don't know the instructions.
Okay.
Hit me up with the VU.
New chant. Okay. Yeah. So Kirk, when I say VU, you say ka. VU.
Ka.
VU.
Ka.
When I say VU, you say ka. VU.
Ka.
VU.
Ka. VUCA in the house on Xizzle TV. Thank you, Dr. Rosie Ward. Hope you enjoyed the experience. Thank you so much for being here and elevating my mindset and elevating all our viewers' mindset and introducing us this concept of rehumanizing and how you do it in a unique, energetic, and beautiful fashion. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun.